Welcome everybody to the fourth lesson in Chess for Absolute Beginners. We're going to dive right into something I haven't taught you yet, or at least I haven't said explicitly. I want to point out in this silly setup that I have right now, the bishop here is kind of aiming my king, but lucky for me, I've got this pawn in the way. So I'm not at the moment in any danger, but let's pretend it's my turn. And there's a rule in chess where I'm actually not allowed to do this, because then you could capture me on your next move. And so I can't do that. So it's actually illegal to move any piece that would immediately let your king be killed. So in fact, even if you had brought your queen all the way down here, you might be thinking, well, that's not a good place to put your queen because I could just capture it with my pawn. But if I did that, and I can't do that, by the way, but imagining I could, I would take that and you would come in here and capture my king. So, whoa, that happens all the time. So the point is you're not allowed. So this is a perfectly safe spot for your queen, actually, because this pawn can't move. Obviously can't go backward, can't go forward, and can't capture, because any of those would be a problem for my king. Now I could move my king. And now it's back to your turn with the black pieces. And now on my next turn, I can capture you, or I can move it forward. So you might bring your queen in or do whatever from this point on. Now building on that, let me just, let's do this. Okay. Building on that, let me put my king right next to your king. And let's put you in check here. Let's pretend I have a bishop and he's aiming at your king. So with your king being up against the edge of the board, he obviously has 5 squares to choose from. But following on what I said right here, you're never allowed to do something that would put your king in danger. You're actually not allowed to move your king next to my king, because then on the next move, I could just capture you. And so that's a problem. Oh, see, just like that, I captured you. So that actually removes these 3 squares as options for you. And you can't go to any of them. You can, of course, still go here or here. Those are fine. But you can't move to any of the red ones. And this is exactly why having a rook and checking you that way is even more powerful, because these 3 were gone because of my king. My king can capture anything from there. But now this rook covers this whole entire line, and now these squares are dead for you too. So that's the idea. And the centerpiece of this lesson really has to do with 2 kings facing each other, kind of squaring off. The big titans of the chess match. They're old, and it's like 2 old men fighting or something like that. But neither one of us is allowed to approach these 3 squares, and that's the key central part. I'm assuming that many of your games have played out where you're exchanging lots of pieces. So trading queen for queen, or rook for rook, or bishop for knight, or whatever. Lots of pieces go away, and sometimes you'll find yourself in a position like this where everything's dead except for the 2 kings, and maybe you have a pawn. Or maybe there's some straggling pieces over here, like maybe I've got a pawn and you've kind of got a pawn blocking it. So we're not really worried about these guys. So there are times when you really do need your king in the battle, right? This pawn's all alone, and if I don't do something, this king is going to slowly, work his way down the board and gobble up that pawn. So I need to protect him. So let's say it's white's turn, and I just try to make a run for it. That obviously doesn't work, because he can't go by himself because he just gets captured, right? So he needs an escort, and so your king is going to play the role of escort based on what I just told you about how kings aren't allowed to stand next to each other. So let's say you're moving towards my pawn, and I'm going to come over here and protect my pawn. And now, based on what I just told you, you can't go here. But you can still come over here. So you're still trying to go after my pawn. And I'm going to protect my pawn. I can't go here, because then we'd be standing next to each other. But I can come down here. Now your king has to go somewhere. my pawn, remember, covers these two, and you're not allowed to stand by my king. So you're actually not allowed to move forward at all. So maybe you move, well, let's just say you move to the side that way. I could put you in check, and he can't take my pawn because then they'd be standing next to each other. But you can move in front of me. And maybe I'm just going to walk around the back of my pawn. And let's say, and again, I'm going to tell you a strategy for how to deal with this. But it's going to be frustrating at first because you guys will just be dancing around trying to figure out how am I going to get this pawn to the end of the board. And I'll show you how in a second. But I just want to keep pointing out that my king has both of these covered and he's protecting my pawn. So you have to move backward. You can't actually move side to side either because my pawn covers both of those. So your king has to move backward. And now that he moves backward, you don't want to push the pawn because then he could just take it. So you bring your escort, right? The bodyguard. And so we've made it one square. And let's say you're going to back. Let's say you go over here. Here's the strategy for how, depending on whose move it is, if it's the right timing, black can stop this pawn from ever reaching the end of the board. And if it's the right timing for white, then white can absolutely get his pawn to the end of the board. So let's move the king. You kind of want your king to lead the way. That's sort of the spirit. You don't have to memorize any of this. Just sort of have the spirit that you really want your king ahead of your pawn. Because now you can't go here, you can't go here, and you can't go here because my king is blocking off these squares for you. And so now you're forced to move backwards. And I could move the pawn, but I'm actually going to send the king up the board a little more. My king protects these three spots, and I know on my next turn I can bring the pawn up. You don't want your king to get too far ahead because then the other king can run back here and get him. But I know I've got these three squares covered, so if you can get your king into a nice lead, I know that next move I have 3 protected spots for my pawn coming up. So even if he starts to say, I'm going to come get that pawn, now you can bring your pawn into one of those protected spots. And that's check. If your king, if the black king ever goes backward, well, now you're good. Now you kind of have a free run at that point. So I don't think the king is going to move backwards. He's trying to stop this guy. He can't move here and can't move there, right? That's the whole power of the kings standing across from each other, is he can't move forward at all. And so he has to keep trying his best to go over here. And again, I could push the pawn, but I want to keep the king ahead of my pawn if possible. And this is going to get the job done all the way to the end, right? So your king is going to, can't go forward, so let's send him backward. And I'll bring my pawn. And once I get my king here, there's nothing you can do to stop me. Yeah, and so, again, you can't go here, can't go here, can't go here, can't go here. So now you're stuck in a corner. And we have a problem. Because look what I've done. And this is another thing I haven't taught you yet. This pawn can't move. He's locked up with this pawn. Your king is not allowed to move here or here because of this guy. And he's not allowed to move here because of this guy. And so this is called a stalemate. This is a draw. Neither side wins. And that's a problem. So what I'd really prefer is if this were reversed, because now I can walk this guy in and get a queen, and there's nothing you could do to stop me because you just have to go off to the side here. But the fact that we were like this is actually a draw and neither side wins. So be careful about squishing a king. He's not in check, right? It's not checkmate because he's not in check. If it were white's turn, he could do this, and then black could do this, and then I could get a queen. But it's not white's turn. It's black's turn to move, but he has no legal moves, and that's a draw. That's a stalemate. So let's just play this out one more time. This time, instead of boxing a king into a corner, he's going to have this whole half of the board to escape to. So there won't be a draw this time. So I'd go here. He'd go here. I'll bring my pawn with. You know, he might move here. You know, maybe I go here. He goes here. And again, I'm going to try to keep my king in the lead as much as possible. Actually, I'm going to move my... capture my own king. Move my king first. Because that prevents all these squares. And so now he's sort of stuck. And now I'm home free. Right? He can't go to any of these. So he might have to move here. And he can come challenge it, but it doesn't do him any good because now I get a queen. I get a queen right there. And he has to run. And then I'll have to come chase you down. So I thought I'd show you this option you can do on chess.com. I cranked up the computer all the way to 3200, and I'm going to try to get this pawn to the end of the board, meaning the computer is playing the black pieces, and so it's like a super mega computer. And I will definitely get this pawn as long as I do the right move. And what's tough about teaching this to a brand new player is, first of all, you're going to be playing other inexperienced players who may not have an idea on how to stop this pawn. So it shouldn't be too bad. Really, all I want you to take away from this lesson is try to keep your king in the front. Don't rush your pawn ahead. If your pawn gets in the lead, then it's going to be easier for this guy to stop it. So just kind of keep your king in the lead. That's kind of what... Everything else is just trial and error. You can always try to come online and pull up simulators like this, but let me show you how he can stop me. If I actually move my pawn first, he gets in front of me, and now I'm going to have trouble getting my king in the lead, right? Because I can't go forward. So what? I'll maybe go behind my pawn, and he goes there, and you can see he's just going to kind of dance back and forth, and I don't have a good way. See, he's blocking my path forward, so I don't have a way to get my king ahead of my pawn. I can't go to any of these squares. It won't let me. So, you know, if I move my pawn, that's fine. I can do that, but watch what happens here when we get to the end of the board. Check. And something kind of funny happens here. I can't go here because he's got me covered. And I can't walk away from my pawn because then he'll just capture it. So really my only move is to go here. And so this is actually a draw because the king can't go to these squares because my pawn has those covered, and he can't come towards me, and he can't take me because of my king is guarding all three of those. And so it's a draw. And so as long as he keeps his king in front of me and doesn't ever let my king get into that lead, then I can't ever win. So remember, the key is to keep your king in the lead. Now I can run for it. Where's he going? Why are you going off there? I mean, if he's just going to run away, then see, I'm going to keep my king in the lead, and then I'll just escort him all the way down here. Let's go all the way back. See if he picks a different move. See, I just want my king to really be the escort here. In fact, I might challenge him again. This is going to force him to move backward, remember. And so my king has plenty of room now that I can start to... See, I'm afraid if I push here, he's going to come back, and then I'm going to be in this tricky spot. So I want to keep my king up in front so that he can't get any grounds on me. And then now my king covers all three of these squares here. And so now my pawn has an escort all the way in. And that's the idea. Okay, so let's learn the next lesson. How the heck do I checkmate this guy now? Because I can't just chase him around with my queen. So kind of what I like to do is, the way I like to think of this is I've got him in this box right now. He can never cross these rivers, right? My queen's going to forever cut off this range and this range. So he moved diagonally, and so I'm going to make his box a little bit smaller now, right? I've got him in this small of a box, and he can never get out. So let me bring my king over, because the king's going to have to help a little. And now, you know what? I'm going to make his box really small. And so now he can't move forward, and he can't come here. In fact, he can't even come here. And so he's just going to, his only two squares are just bouncing back and forth here and here. That allows me to get my king closer and closer. And then finally I can, and so that's that. Let me try this one more time. Let's go here, let's go here, let's go here, here. And I'll show you it with a rook this time, just so you can kind of see it both ways. It's a little harder with a rook. So again, the idea is make a small box that he can't get out of. Bring your king in to help. And he's not going to let me make the box any smaller this time. He's going to dance back and forth. So let's do this. Oh, this is certainly a little harder to teach. Let's come all the way down here. So I've got half the board, right? He's stuck on this half of the board. Let's keep going, keep going. There. This is what I was waiting for. They call this the opposition. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what they call it, but we've covered this 3 times in this video now. So he cannot move forward, and now is my time to check him, because I know he can't move forward. Right, so he has to move backward, and now he has even less board to play on, right? So now let's bring my king in. Let's come over here, and we'll just chase him to the end of the board. There you go, we're lined up again, so now's my chance. He's going to chase me this way. I have a problem. He could capture me, so I just got to run to the other side real fast. And now we're lined up across from each other, and it's my time to check him. Now he's stuck on this back row. And so now I just got to bring the king down here and squish him. Let's come right here. I don't like to line up directly across from him. Bring my rook to safety, and then we'll just chase him into the corner. If I move here, he's going to move here. And so I'll just kind of delay a move with my rook. And now we're lined up. And now we're across from each other. And now I have checkmate. And so that it's a little harder to do with the rook, because you kind of have to, but it continues with this principle of getting yourself directly across from the king, because it forces them to go backward, or at least sideways, but can't go sideways here. So I think that's it for this lesson. Plenty to think about there. Well, one thing to maybe keep in mind is if you want to practice this against the computer or against live players, the more pieces you exchange, the more you're going to get into that kind of open board territory and sort of practice using your king to escort your pawn to the end of the board. If you're playing another new player that doesn't know how to move their pawn to the end of the board, then just keep your king in front of their king, and you might be able to stop their pawn. And vice versa, right? If you really want to get yours to the end of the board, keep your king in the lead, and that should give you a leg up against other new players, or even some of these early computer players. So good luck. Maybe go play whatever 10, 15, 20 games and come on back for the next lesson. Thanks.